the greater Timberlane community. Let's give a great Timberlane welcome again to Governor George W. Bush.
I appreciate the invitation. Thank you all for giving me a chance to come to your school. Thanks to citizens for coming to listen. We're getting close to voting time. And I'm here to ask for the vote. I'm here to ask for the vote. I want to thank you all for your interest in the campaign. For those of you who are 18 and over, I urge you to go to the polls. It's important. For those of you who are not 18 years yet, I appreciate you paying attention, because someday your day is going to come. And our country is only as good as the willingness of our people to participate in democracy. So thank you for giving me a chance to come. I'm traveling your state today with a United States Senator who's my friend, he's a good advisor, he's a smart, honest, capable man, and that is Senator Judd Gregg. Shares the same characteristics, although he's not in the United States Senate. He's in the United States Congress. His name is Charlie Bass, Congressman Charlie Bass. I wish I could introduce you to my wife. The best decision I ever made was to ask Laura Bush to marry me. Decision she ever made was to say yes. I want you all to hear this. She and I know that the most important job we'll ever have is not to be governor or first lady. Our most important job is to be a good dad and a good mother. We are the proud parents of 18-year-old seniors in high school, so I know exactly what your teachers are putting up with. We love them a lot. We love them a lot. As you can imagine, I've asked Barbara and Jenna to make a huge sacrifice because I'm running to be the president. And I want to explain to you why I've asked them to do so, then I look forward to answering questions. One, I want our great American dream to shine brightly for everybody. I want people who are in high school, people who are in the country to be able to say, if I work hard and make the right decisions in life, the American dream is meant for me. The dream of owning something. The dream of being able to raise a family in a peaceful and prosperous place. It's important to understand governments don't create wealth. That's not the role of government. The role of government is to create an environment in which entrepreneurship flourishes, in which small businesses can grow to be big businesses. I hope somebody up there has got a really interesting idea sometime, and the environment is such that you're willing to risk capital, to work hard, to put people to work, and realize your dream. We'll be prosperous if we do some smart things. We'll be prosperous if we have a civil justice system that is fair and balanced. That's why I'm for tort reform. We'll be prosperous if we have a president who fights for free trade. Free trade. This is an interesting issue. Perhaps you've discussed it in some of your history classes. The question is, will our nation and the president fight to open up markets so we trade all across and all around the world? Or will we build barriers around our country? Will we retreat within our borders? I'm going to tell people, fearful people build walls, and confident people tear them down. And I'm confident in the ability of the New Hampshire entrepreneur, or the farmers, or the ranchers in this country to be able to compete anywhere, so long as the playing field is level. I believe free trade is good. I believe free trade encourages prosperity and enhances the ability of people to find high-paying, high-quality jobs. So we'll be prosperous if we embrace free trade. And we'll be prosperous if we keep the economy going by having a tax cut. There's an interesting debate in this campaign. It's a debate about what to do with surplus money. Do we dare leave it in Washington, D.C., or do we give it back to the working people? If we leave it in Washington, it's going to be spent on bigger federal government. I intend to pass it back to the people who work for a living. Everybody ought to have a tax cut who pays taxes. I'm oftentimes asked, why is it that the people aren't asking for a tax cut? Why is it? I think it's because, in spite of the fact that taxes are the highest they've been since World War II, I think it's because the voices out of Washington have said, you can't have a tax cut, otherwise you'll lose your Social Security. Or you can't have a tax cut, otherwise there'll be no Medicare. Okay. The truth of the matter is, I believe you can have both. I've set aside $2 trillion for Social Security. All the payroll taxes, aiming for Social Security, need to be spent on only one thing, Social Security. There is money in budgets for Medicare. So long as we reform the system, it'll work. There's money to meet the basic needs of government, and we have money left over. The economy is strong. The people are paying more taxes. There is money left over, and the fundamental question is what to do with it. I believe it encourages economic growth by cutting the taxes on everybody who pays taxes. I subscribe to the economic theory that by reducing marginal rates, it will enhance productivity and entrepreneurship and growth. But I also want to change the tax code to make it more fair. The death tax is unfair. The earnings test on Social Security recipients is unfair. The marriage penalty is unfair. And let me tell you what else is unfair. It is unfair to have a tax code that has a high marginal rate on, say, a single mom with children who's working hard to access a better life for her kids. Incredibly enough, the way the tax code is structured today, that if you're a single woman, say with 2 children, which by the way is the toughest job in America, it's a tough job, and you're working hard to put food on your table, as you head toward higher incomes, because of the tax structure, you pay higher taxes on every dollar earned than someone making $200,000 in America. That's a fact. And that's not right, and that's not fair, and I intend to do something about it should I become the President of the United States. And I'm running to keep the peace. I'm running to keep the peace. When I was in high school, it was a different world. It was us versus the Russians. It was a world of, it was a Cold War, they called it. And we're now in a post-Cold War era. But that should not lead us to complacency. It's still a dangerous world. It is a world of madmen. There are countries that hate our values and hate what we stand for. And this nation is plagued by low morale in our military. Just ask a relative who's in the military. Ask a neighbor if they've got a son or a daughter in the military what morale is like today. Pays low. Men and women are on food stamps that wear the uniform. That's not right. We're over-deployed and under-trained in the United States military. I believe it is incredibly important to have a strong military of high morale in order to keep the peace. I'm going to rebuild the military power of the United States of America. I do so to promote the peace. I do so to promote the peace. I also know we must use our technologies to bring certainty into an uncertain world. Perhaps some of you have been reading in your history classes about anti-ballistic missile systems. This is the use of technology to be able to shoot down the missiles of somebody who wants to launch one. I think our country must use our research and development capacity to have an anti-ballistic missile system, both theater-based and national-based, that's able to be able, for the Commander-in-Chief to be able to say, don't you dare threaten the United States of America. Or don't try to blackmail ourselves and our allies. No, we must bring we must bring certainty into an uncertain world. And finally, in order to enhance the morale of the men and women in uniform, it is important to have a commander-in-chief who respects the people in uniform and in turn earns the respect of the men and women who wear the United States uniforms. Now, we'll be prosperous and strong if we do the right things. But prosperity alone is simple materialism. There has to be a greater calling to America. There are too many people in this country who say the American dream is not meant for me. Too many people who say, I don't have hope for the future. I believe our nation must set this goal. Every child should be educated and no child should be left behind. In order to make sure that the American dream shines brightly, education is part of the cornerstone for a hopeful tomorrow. I want to thank the teachers who are here, and I want to thank the principal and the superintendent for opening up your school. But I want to make it clear to you and to the voters and to everybody else, I am not running to become the federal superintendent of schools. I don't want to be the national principal. I'll be a president who trusts the people of New Hampshire to make the right decisions for the children of New Hampshire. I strongly believe in local control of schools. I believe in aligning authority and responsibility at the local level. I've seen what works when it comes to educating children. We've got a good record in the state of Texas. It starts with having leaders who set high standards and high hopes. I believe we must say that every child can learn, and we must demand the best. We must demand the best. Excellence ought to be the standard. And I believe in accountability. I believe in measurement. In my state of Texas, we have a strong accountability system, and we post the results. Setting high standards and saying we expect the best and measuring is the cornerstone for what has been great education reform in the state of Texas. And people are responding. We've got great teachers, and I'm sure you do in New Hampshire, that are responding, that are answering the call. And when we find success, it's important to thank everybody. When we find children trapped in failed schools, it's important to blow the whistle on failure and demand something different. Should I become the president, I'm going to pass power back from Washington, D.C. to local jurisdictions. We spent about 7% of the education budgets in the respective states come from the federal government. About 50% of the paperwork does too. And it's important to free people and to free broad categories of expenditure. We got to trust local people when it comes to spending money. We do. We do. If we spend money, I'm going to ask the question, what are the results? We spend money, federal money on children like we do in Title I programs, and maybe you've got some in this district. The question is, what are the results? Are the children learning to read and write and add and subtract? It's a simple but profound question. And if the answer is yes, there ought to be a bonus pool available as an incentive. But if the answer is no, after a reasonable period of time, we must free the parents to make a different decision for their children. You see, it's important to have an accountability system, and it's important to have consequences tied to the accountability system. I believe this country is on the verge of an education renaissance, the likes of which we've never dreamt about. It's important to have the fertile grounds for reform. We can do better in America, and we can do better with a system that trusts local people and demands accountability and insists upon high standards. And so that's why I've asked my girls to run. There's a lot of issues. There's a lot of issues. These are the fundamental cornerstone of the campaign. I'm running if you're for me, I want to thank you for your vote and your confidence. Please go vote. If you're what we call a tire kicker, somebody hadn't made up your mind yet, I want to thank you for coming and giving me a chance to share some of my thoughts, and I look forward to answering questions and shaking your hand. If you're for one of my worthwhile opponents, and I'm running against good people, just only vote once. But no matter who you're for, I want you to know I'm incredibly optimistic about the future of this country. I want to talk about what I believe, what I'm for. There's going to be differences of opinions, and we can express those differences of opinions without tearing each other up, without resorting to negative, tearing down politics. My chief opponent in this campaign is a Senator John McCain. He is a friend of mine. He's a friend of mine before the campaign, and he is going to be a friend of mine after the campaign. He is a good, decent man. We just have a fundamental disagreement. We have a fundamental disagreement. He thinks he ought to be the Republican nominee. And I think I ought to be. So I'm going to run a campaign. I want there to be an honest discussion of issues so that the folks who are watching the campaign say, these are people trying to elevate the process. And let me conclude by saying this, that should I earn the confidence of the people of this state and other states and become the president, should the people, after taking a look at my record as the governor of the state of Texas, say we trust his judgment, we understand that he understands what leadership is about, that we know he knows how to set an agenda, that he's a uniter, not a divider, that he has brought people together to achieve what's good for America. Should I earn the judgment based upon a record that is positive and optimistic when I put my hand on the Bible, I will swear to not only uphold the laws of the land, I will swear to uphold the honor and the dignity of the office to which I have been elected. That was the pledge I made to the people of Texas, and I have kept. And that is a pledge I'll make to the people of America, and it's a pledge I will keep. I want to thank you for giving me a chance to come.
Have cited your $57 million campaign fundraising as among their reasons for dropping out of the election. I was wondering, what are your views on campaign finance reform, and do you think it's important to make money less of a factor in presidential elections?
Thank you very much. You kind of gave me an opening of the three people you cited, two of whom supported my campaign now, Elizabeth Dole and Lamar Alexander. Let me say, politics in a state like New Hampshire is way beyond the campaign funding. In order to win in this state, it requires somebody to shake hands and look people in the eye. This is retail politics in this state. This is politics where you came from a restaurant where I walked in, and I looked people in the eye and said, I want your vote, here's what I believe. Campaigning is exactly what we're doing here. Now, I'm for campaign funding reform, and I think we ought to have it. You need to know, and I'm sure you do know, that there is no corporate money in primaries. There is no labor union money in primaries. Contribution in primaries, like the election we're all going through, come from individuals. I have received about $400 a person average contribution. These are people from all walks of life in every state of the union who made the decision to say, who best to be the Republican Party nominee? Who's got the optimistic message? Who can unite? And who can lead the country toward a better tomorrow? That's what people have asked, and they've decided to voluntarily contribute. I think a couple of reforms that are necessary are, one, I believe it's important to make sure individuals have the supreme say of who becomes the candidate. And I think we ought to encourage individual contributions. I frankly think the limit ought to be raised to make individuals the major part of any campaign. And I think we ought to have instant disclosure of campaign contributions, which I have done. I was the first candidate to put on the internet, on my webpage, near instant disclosure of who's given to me and when they gave. I believe we ought to ban corporate money and labor soft money from political parties. That's where it goes. So long as the reform is complete and whole. Right now in America, if you're a member of a labor union, the labor union can spend your money the way it sees fit without your permission. In order to have complete and fair reform, it seems like to me that the labor union member ought to be able to say yes or no as to how his or her money is spent on and as to who his or her money is spent on. And so I support campaign reform, but I am not going to support a plan that hurts what I stand for and the conservative cause that I stand for. Good question. Good question.
America is one of the last countries industrialized countries that does not provide public access to medical services, and I was wondering how you plan to approach that.
Let me tell you what I'm not for. I don't want the federal government running the health care program of America. I don't want the federal government telling patients what to do. I think it's very important for, as you study different options in health care, is to look at Canada, where health care is rationed. So I think any health care plan must help people who can't afford health care at the federal level, but must trust people to make decisions for their health care plans. One of the health care plans that is incredibly important that we make sure is safe and secure is Medicare. That's the health care plan for the elderly, by and large. Today, the health care plan is run by a 132,000-page document, kind of a federalized system that makes this determination and that determination. You get to do this and that. I think what we ought to do is design a system that allows for individuals to purchase health insurance programs that meet their specific needs. So seniors can design programs tailored to their needs, and that for the seniors that can't afford certain a beneficial package, that we ought to supplement their premium at the federal level. So there is a role for government, but the role of government is not to dictate to consumers and providers. There is another role for government, and that is to make sure that poor people get health care insurance. That's through Medicaid and what's called children's health insurance programs. There's an issue of the uninsured in America today. Some of the uninsured are able-bodied, healthy youngsters who choose not to buy insurance. I believe we ought to encourage medical savings accounts. These are accounts that allow for savings. It's almost like an investment vehicle where people put money aside not only for their health, but can roll over for future health needs. Hopefully that will serve as an incentive for people to invest in their health in the future. For the working uninsured, our country must do two things. One, we must provide more flexibility to states to be able to use CHIPS money and other monies to be able to help supplement the purchase at the business level for working folks. But we also got to work with states to encourage them to develop a more basic health care insurance plan, to make the plan itself more affordable, so like catastrophic or doctor visits or prescription drugs, without a lot of this benefits loaded on. I mean, part of this affordability issue. And one of the things I'm going to talk about a little later on down the road is asking Congress to allow associations like the National Federation of Independent Businessmen to write a national health care and to allow for them to purchase and pool, to be able to purchase on a more affordable basis health care for the various workers and small businesses around the country. There needs to be some economies of purchase when it comes to providing affordable health care. My answer to you is this. There's a lot of discussion about health care. You're going to hear people say the federal government is going to be the solution. I disagree. I think the federal government can help, but the decisions must rest with the consumers. And where there are problems with HMOs, we must insist upon reform. My state has led the nation when it comes to HMO reform, and I will just give you a quick example. If you have a dispute with your HMO, now in the state of Texas, you're able to take your case to what's called an independent review organization. The independent review organization is like an arbitration panel that hears the case of both consumer and insurance company. If the ruling goes against the insurance company and the insurance company ignores the ruling, it then becomes a cause of action in court. So there is a consequence. There is a consequence. Anyway, that's a very long answer to a complex question. Thank you.
Do you think that you would be in the same position of power if you've been born with a different last name?
That's a great question. You mean if I were old George Jones? I inherited half my dad's friends and all his enemies. I wouldn't have been in this position had I not done my job as governor of Texas. Had I not taken my case to the people and said, give me a chance to be your governor. And had I failed, I wouldn't be standing here. If I had to run a campaign that attracted the people, I had a tough opponent in 1994, an incumbent governor by the name of Governor Ann Richards. And I ran a campaign that was positive and optimistic, and I talked about what I intended to do. I talked a lot about public education, how to make our public schools the best in America. I believe we're headed that way, in all due respect. But that's what I campaigned on. And people heard the message, and they listened very closely. A lot of them had to ask that question. Who is this guy named Bush? Does he have a background where we would entrust him to governor of Texas? And I was able to convince the people that I should assume the oath of office. And then I did in office what I said I would do. I was the first governor in my state's history to be elected to back-to-back four-year terms. No governor had ever done that before. Because I talked about issues, I talked about my record, I talked about what I intended to do beyond that. And so, to answer your question, had I never run for governor and won, I wouldn't be standing here. Had I never done an office and been reelected, I wouldn't be standing here. And if I didn't have a platform that was positive, that people could hear, a platform that's going to lead to a better tomorrow, I don't think I'd be doing very well now that I've got running. I'm blessed by having great parents. I love my dad. I love my mother. I have been given a fabulous gift called unconditional love. But I fully understand. I fully understand there are some in this state who are saying, I'm not interested. If he's born to that guy, I'm not interested. And there are some saying, I think I want to come and hear him. He's got a pretty cool mother. I want to hear what he has to say. So it's been a mixed bag.
Governor Bush, I was wondering, as president, how would you deal with the foreign situations like Bosnia and Kosovo in terms of U.S. military involvement?
The next president must clearly define the national strategic interests of America. And it's those national strategic interests that hopefully will never require troops, but will, if necessary, to maintain our interests. It is in our national strategic interest that our own hemisphere be free trade, favoring of corrupt elite like they have done over the past couple of years. We don't know whether they'll adopt rule of law. We hope so. We need to lead them in that direction. I hope we can do so. But we don't know yet. And therefore, it's important to have a strong and confident NATO. I would hope that in analysis, as we look back, we can make our determination as to whether or not it was necessary to send troops to the Balkans. First, was there something that could have been done through diplomacy to prevent the deployment of troops? But once the president made the decision, I supported him on that decision. I didn't support the idea of taking ground troops off the table because I believe any time you commit troops, you must do so with one thing in mind, and that is sure victory. You cannot tie one hand behind your back if you're going to send men and women into combat. But I supported the move in Kosovo because I think it's important. I thought it was important for NATO to be strong and confident. I was worried that an unchecked Milosevic would affect our alliance in NATO, which in turn would make it harder to maintain peace in Europe. The Far East is in our national strategic interests. We must change the relationship between China and the United States from one of strategic partnership to competitor. But competitors can find room for agreement. There is a big debate about trade with China. I believe it is in our nation's interest to trade with China for two reasons. One, it's good for our farmers and ranchers and entrepreneurs to be able to sell product into China. That is good. It is good for our economy. It is good for the job base. It's good for the economy. It's overall good. It makes sense. It also makes sense to trade with an entrepreneurial class that's beginning to grow and become much more predominant in China than ever before. That's to our nation's advantage. When people get a breath of freedom, they demand all kinds of freedoms. When people see the greatness of the marketplace, where consumers have choice and options, when people see what entrepreneurship is like, where somebody can have a dream and work hard to achieve the dream, it's the beginnings, it's the root, in this case, of other freedoms. Imagine what's going to take place when the internet takes hold in China. Freedom's genie will be out of the bottle. Individuals will be able to have all kinds of access like they've never had before. So it's to our advantage to trade. But we've got to make it clear to China that our alliances in the Far East mean a lot to us, that our relationship with Japan is important, that our relationship with South Korea is important, that that we're going to hold them to not the spread of weapons of mass destruction, that we expect for there to be a peaceful arrangement, and that we expect there to be a peaceful resolution of the dispute between China and Taiwan as the form of government which will ultimately govern those two entities. And finally, the Middle East is in our strategic interests. That's in our vital strategic interests, that there be stability in the Middle East, that our friend and ally Israel will be recognized as a true democracy that it is. That's in our national interests. And so, to answer your question, a long answer, but that's part of the definition of a president, is defined clearly so people understand what's in our interests. I would hope we'd never have to use troops, but if we do, there's one thing in mind, that's victory. That's clear mission, clear exit, and victory. You're next. Next.
You already mentioned Social Security money set aside. If you become president, will you have any plans for keeping Social Security solvent in my generation?
Yes. It starts with setting aside payroll taxes. It also recognizes that you should be able to manage your own personal savings account so that you can take advantage of the compounding rate of interest of the growth of the economy. I think it's important for workers who are beginning to enter the workplace to be able to manage their own account. And the great debate is going to be, will the president be willing to bring people from both parties together to solve this problem? Social Security is an issue that sometimes it seems like in Washington people just want to use it to try to embarrass somebody. People just want to kind of hang it out there and then get somebody talking about it and they try to hit them over the head with it as a political issue. To me, a leader is somebody who says to America loud and clear, this is an issue that I intend to bring people together to solve. It's the answer, you bet. And this is an important issue because now is the time to bring both Democrat and Republican together to do what's right. To put a system in place that not only makes sure the Social Security system is secure and safe today, but is in the long term. The real issue is whether or not there will be a system for her. Now, let me say something about leadership. It is important for somebody running for office to have a clear and consistent point of view on issues so that people know exactly where he stands and that they're not change over the course of the campaign. Because my job is to earn the respect and will of the people. Somebody running for political office, the real true capital at the executive level that you earn is from the people. When the people speaks, it's important for me, like on my tax plan, to have a consistent plan. That somebody can understand. If you want to take the time to read it, you can. It doesn't alter over the course of the campaign, that it's clear what it is. So that should I win, I'm able to stand up in front of the Congress and say, this is what the people heard, and this is what the people endorsed. That's what democracy is all about. It seems like we kind of strayed away from that a little bit. But that's how I have learned to lead. I've got great trust in the American people. I don't like some of the decisions. I thought the decision in '92 was a little misguided. But it's the people whose will. That's where the president gets his strength. It's by convincing the people to support. So one of my things I'm going to say is give me a chance to bring people from both parties together to get the Social Security issue resolved. Same on the military, same on Medicare, same on economic growth. As you notice, I made some, I talk about issues all day long, but I believe a president should have a few major priorities and spend his capital on getting those priorities done. And that's exactly what I intend to do. That's what I've learned to do as the governor of the state of Texas. That's what I'll do as president if I'm given the chance to do so. Last question. Yes, sir. Where's the man? Guy wore a tie. You ought to be allowed to ask a question.
Mr. Bush.
Yes.
The internet has opened a new frontier for Americans and the world. What are your intentions toward censorship, privacy, taxation, and government regulation on the internet?
Right, good question. Let's start with the taxation issue. We should not tax access to the internet. The question is on trade on the internet. And I support the current moratorium, and I believe we ought to extend the moratorium till we truly understand the full extent of e-commerce. There's a difference between access and commerce on the internet. I think it makes sense to extend the moratorium so we fully understand what e-commerce, its promise, and maybe its downside. During the course of the debates we've had, and there's a lot of discussion about people saying, well, what e-commerce will do is strengthen the mom and pop businesses in the town squares and all across America. Well, I hope that's the case. But I want to make sure it does. I want to understand fully what e-commerce means. I think the internet has got great promise and great opportunity and great hope, but it's just beginning. And so I think we ought to extend the moratorium until we know more. In terms of privacy, I support privacy. I'm not exactly sure. I don't like the idea, and I am a little nervous about my own personal numbers floating around in cyberspace to be picked up by somebody who I may not want to have it. I didn't like the idea when somebody got our driver's licenses in Texas and put them on the internet. I didn't like it. And so I'll err on the side of privacy. In terms of what's on the internet, I think that we can work with software providers to provide filters so that people have the option of filtering out garbage. I think we ought to filter out garbage. I think we ought to filter out garbage in public libraries, and I think we ought to do so into school libraries as well. Now, if you're a mother or dad, you can make that choice yourself. That's up to you. But I'm going to remind people that it's important to be a diligent mother and father. That's the most important job we have, is to be a mom and pay attention to your children, pay attention to what your children are up to. And so to answer your question, I believe that there is I believe in the freedom of speech, but I don't believe in, I believe we can use the same technologies that encourage this unbelievable growth and opportunity can be the same technologies that provide modicum of decency in public places, on public computers and public access. I believe the internet is going to provide fantastic educational opportunities. I believe that as the highways, the ability to put highways, the cyber highways, whether it be over the air or through cable or through telephone, as that opportunity increases more and more, we'll be able to link schools like never before. Remote schools in the state of Texas will be able to have a physics lecture on a near real-time basis from a university. People will be able to enrich their curriculum in an easy way, the likes of which we've never dreamt about before. I think medicine is going to be fantastic opportunities folks who live in remote areas to be able to receive, access to quality care, to be able to be analyzed in ways that's hard to believe over the internet, and have your records and have your certain condition analyzed by doctors. There's some fantastic opportunities available for us in this country. That's why it's important that every child learn to read early. That's why it's important that people see the hope of America. Because there's no telling how you're going to be able to make a living. This will be fantastic. But you've got to do it yourself. You've got to make right choices in life. You've got to understand that you're responsible for the decisions you make in life. That you're the person responsible for what you do. That you can't blame anybody else. And if you make the right choices, and if you're hopeful, and if you're smart, you can be anything you want to be in the great land called America. That's the hope and promise of America, and I wish you all the best. Thank you for letting me come, and God bless you.
Many of you may not realize it, but a year and a day from today is the inauguration of the President of the United States. And certainly, Mr. Bush, we have a kind of a cramped facility today, but I know you may not know, but the voters of the Timberlane region have voted to build us a nice, beautiful fine arts center to be completed 2.5 years from now. And we'd like to invite you at that time to come back to us and address us in our big, nice, new facility. Also, today I noticed that you're dressed in navy blue. I'm sorry. That's all right. And maybe as a remembrance that a year and a day from now that you were at Timberlane, we'd like to give you a little sweater here to keep you a little bit warmer. We know you should have a down coat today, but we don't have that. But on behalf of Timberlane, I'd just like to thank you for bringing the campaign here today and share it with our students in our community. Thank you.